In this video, I will talk about React Router and set the routes for the shopping cart. In our past lecture, we said that our shopping cart would be a single-page application. It means that all our components will be rendered inside one single HTML page, and so providing a smooth user experience similar to a native or desktop application. Now, if user access to all our different components solely through an index HTML, how do we manage the navigation? The answer is React Router. React Router is a component that allows us to create the navigation structure for our single-page application. The most important method in React Router are router, route, index route, browse history, and hash history. Router methods wraps all our React app and register the internal routes. Route allows us to define routes and respective component to render. Index route allows us to define which component should be rendered first when our main component is loaded. Browser history and hash history, they both have the same purpose to listen and track all internal URLs, but hash history does it independently from the routes set in our server. Hash history is able to do that because marks any route with an hash sign. Hash history can be helpful during development because it allows you to test your routes independently from the server routes. But it's not good for production because your URLs will look ugly and your routes will not be SEO compliant. I will show you how hash history works, but we will use browse history in our app because I want you to learn how to develop a production-ready application. Now let's see how React Router works in practice by taking our shopping cart as an example. We have one single HTML file. Inside index.html, we wrote a div tag, in which we pass our React component dynamically, and so they are rendered to the screen. The first component that is passed to the HTML is our main component, which works as a container for all other components in our single-page application. We didn't write our main component yet, but soon we will do it. Inside the main component, we will have two static components, a menu bar and a footer that will be always visible and accessible in any part of our application. Then we will have a big portion of the screen where all main children components will be rendered. The first child component will be our book list component. As we said in React Router, the first child component that have to be rendered is called index route. All the other components will be displayed only if users goes to a specific URL. For instance, a contact page will be displayed when user go to contact page and so on. Same for all the rest of components we want to render based on a URL. Now let's implement React Router in our application, and things will look easier to understand. First of all, we need to install React Router in our app. So go to terminal and run npm install save React Router. In app.js, we import router, route, index route, and browse history from React Router. We can remove menu and footer component from here. We will soon use them in our main components. So let's move everything in a constant variable so our code will be more readable. We then import cart component, books form, and main component. Again, we will write main in a couple of minutes. As I said, router will wrap all application and listen to the changes to the URL using history. We then add the main route. Route takes a path and a component to be rendered when the path is invoked. Inside the main path and component, we will set all children component path. The first one rendered by default is the index route, in our case books list. And finally, we set the routes for the rest of children components, books form and cart. Now, in src folder, we create a new file main.js. We import React from React, and then we import menu and footer. We create the main class, and we export default. In render, we add a div tag which contains the menu and the footer. In the middle, we then render all children components, book list, cart, books form, and so on. Now, if we save and run Webpack, if we try to access one internal route, we should see a message from the server telling us we cannot get this URL. I created this error on purpose to help me to explain you the difference between browser history and hash history. Indeed, we are getting this error because browser history is dependent from routes set in the server. If, for instance, we change the path in server.js to accept any routes and restart the server, the error will disappear. Now, let's go back to the server.js and write back our /root. Then save and restart the server. And then we go back to app.js and we import hash history. And we replace browser history with hash history. Save and refresh. And now our URL shows the ugly hash. But because hash history is independent from the server routes, you will be able to access all routes anyway. Okay, I think you got the differences. We can now go back to server.js and accept all routes. Then in app.js we put back the browser history. We save, restart the server and refresh, and test all our internal routes to be sure everything is working as expected.